lawfully performed in one state who moves to another state.
Right now, it seems if somebody gets married in a state that's legal and they move to a state where it's not recognized, like in Idaho, we get treated unfairly here. We did on the tax purposes that you're seeing that a lot of the federal taxes saying that same-sex partners can file jointly. If you come to Idaho, you're going to have to undo that, and you're going to have to fill it out, separately to file with your state taxes, where you have to file separately. So I mean, it's a mess. I wouldn't want to be in that situation. I think it's unfair that people are put in that situation.
What will the city council do if the legislature passes the bill that blatantly removes cities' anti-discrimination ordinances?
I'm not sure they can answer that one.
I would personally suggest that Latah County secede from the state of Idaho. Created by an act of Congress. We've been in existence longer than the state, so perhaps we should look at leaving Idaho.
I'd have to, we're actually stuck with the state, so I'm hoping that the state will evolve.
Yeah, I think that question is something the city council will have to decide for themselves. Sorry, Mark, but yes, I mean, that's...
And there are a couple here, so maybe we can ask them.
Are there any other questions? Rod Hall, do you think this Lugar bill will be found constitutional in any scenario?
Is that for me? That's a tough question. It just depends on what the court will decide. I mean, hopefully, these cases, there's some cases that are going up to the Supreme Court. Hopefully, that they will make that decision. I don't bet on those kind of decisions.
The Idaho Attorney General has stated that thinks it may be unconstitutional, but it's too early to...
Yes, and the legislature, I mean, the state legislature, they get advice sometimes on, what they think is constitutional or not, and their legal advisors, advise them to do one way. And they act the other, it could be unconstitutional. They have the right to act unconstitutional until the court says that they're unconstitutional. Well, a lot of times it costs us millions of dollars. I remember working in Boise and tracking a bill on dealing with interstate commerce and how we dealt with trucks coming through. We treated them differently than we did state truckers. I was told, it's clearly a violation of interstate commerce, and the Attorney General at that time thought it was okay, and it ended up costing us millions of dollars to settle that. So, I mean, they gamble, they have bigger gambling pockets than I do.
The question is, Moscow is thankfully pretty liberal for Idaho. How big of an issue is discrimination against LGBT people in Moscow?
I mean, I can take that a little bit. When I was doing the prosecution, I dealt with some people who had been prejudiced against. People who I confidently identified to me, their sexual preference, and said some of the horror stories that they felt here in Moscow being prejudiced against. So it happens everywhere. It's, even though most people are here pretty tolerant, we have a great community, a great, huge, engaged citizens group, there are people that do discriminate everywhere. That's why we need laws.
It has certainly gotten better in the last 30 years, but I remember at one time, I wouldn't hold Tabitha's hand when we were out at the bar or even kiss her. we were out with some friends not too long ago, and the college kids were being very affectionate with each other and very open. And I remember backing up against the wall and scanning the room to see the responses of the other people in the bar. Because there's a part of me that will always be living in 1983 when I got beaten up. I will always have that fear, and it still happens. You know, certainly to a lesser degree now, but I think it was almost a rite of passage for co-chairs of the university organization to get beaten up. Tabitha and I had an unlisted phone number for years. I ran for city council, and God bless my crazy little heart, I openly ran as a lesbian in 1992, and we immediately ended up getting a new phone number, and it was unlisted because of the death threats and some of the ridiculousness that happened. I don't think Rebecca was receiving death threats on this campaign, but I'm sure, you know, I heard things. You hear people talk. You hear some of the most inane comments. It's no longer as physically intimidating, but I certainly hear it, and I will tell college students occasionally in the store, and even townies, just that's inappropriate language. You can't say that. Please reconsider the words you're using. It happens. It's still a concern.
And I think the biggest changes that happen is through the generations. It's interesting to get to see the kids on campus, and over time, it's not even an issue today. The kids today, most people don't understand what's the difference. They go, "This is my friend. I don't care what what you think we are or what you perceive me to be. They're my human friend." And so it will change. Things will change, and it'll be the generations that come up that they'll look back in the older generation goes, "What the heck were they thinking? Why were they, like that?" Look at our history. Look at our prejudicial history. There was a time when women couldn't vote. A time when certain people couldn't vote. Or sometime, it wasn't that long ago, a couple hundred years ago, when some people were considered just 2/3 of a person. And that's if they paid tax.
Yeah, some of the really interesting studies show exactly that the number one predictor of attitude toward homosexuality is generation, is age. It's not religious affiliation. It's not even political affiliation, but it's age. So I like to tell people, just hang in there.
Yeah, I mean, even 5 years ago, Girls State here in Idaho, both parties introduced anti-discrimination bills. There was one girl who was complaining about it, and she was shouted down, and the adults in the room had to step in and calm everybody down. But it's very interesting because the one girl in that room who didn't have any say in that debate, who didn't speak up at all, was a young girl who had just come out. And Jerica just sat there and watched this whole thing unfold in front of her. And I think she's actually written a blog about it, but it was very interesting because she's not the one who brought it up. It was the straight girls.
Our ordinance does not involve lawsuits, so would the Luker bill apply?
Our ordinance doesn't create a private cause of action. Something like one person can't sue another person. But how our ordinance is set up, if somebody has been discriminated against, they would file a complaint. We have a process where it would be investigated, and at first they'd figure out if there's some way to mediate the problem between the parties. If that happened, it would go, then it would go towards prosecution. They would review it to see if there was a case. And then a person, if it went that far and found out that there wasn't a violation, then somebody could be charged with a misdemeanor. And it would go through the process, during that process, if they decide that they want to come into compliance and work with it and agree to take certain steps to mitigate what they've done, then it could be taken down to an infraction. Well, and the prosecutor also has the discretion to dismiss it, depends on what happened. It's the people who are refusing to change that who's being prosecuted in the courtroom.
This question is basically going again into the Luker bill, and it says, basically, in addition to LGBTQA, the Luker bill proposes that businesses and organizations can refuse services to single moms, not parents or dads. Will this open similar options up to Latah County and other counties?
I don't have an answer.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Does the question mean that that same thing would happen here in Latah County? That you could discriminate against single moms? Is that what it was asking?
You know, I think it goes towards if that's their faith-based reason for doing that. Yeah, it could open up a lot of people. But they wouldn't be able to discriminate based on somebody's person of color because that's a federal law.
Do you have any more questions in the audience? Beth? Here's one there.
So,
That's fine. We have enough time that we can do that, except if nobody has any other written questions, we can ask questions to the floor.
what can we do if, I already know the answer, but what can we do if we're upset about the Luker laws? Can we contact people? Can we call our senators or representatives? Is that an option? Do you think that would do any good?
Would you like to read my questions almost the same?
Well, and to think about what I heard about the hearing, they had 3 hours of hearing on this, and most of it was against the proposal. Fell on deaf ears, I think. The problem is they do whatever they want down there. In my opinion, I mean, I've seen committee hearings where, you know, people be all for, you know, against something, and yet they go ahead with it. And it's tough to see, but I think that it's important that you don't sit back, you get involved, you write a letter, you can write a letter to the editor. There's lots of ways you can be involved. You can contact your representative, or be active. More engaged citizen is going to be, you know, get a better result than people that just sit back. You know, I don't know the quote exactly, but I remember during the Nazis, during World War II, they said when they came for the Jews, you know, I didn't do anything. And now throw someone down the line when they come for you, and they've got taking everybody else away, who's going to protect you?
I think even though it seems futile, that people should still raise their voices to people, their representatives. There's also a petition that's circulating, and some folks may have seen it on Facebook, about add the words. And that's something you could sign. That seems to be gaining more names now that this is sort of shaking the waters, or whatever that phrase is. But yeah, don't stop because you think it's going to do no good. It does feel futile, but you know.
Remember, and vote in November.
Yes.